Hello, crypto confidence community. I'm Jared. I'm with Will Fay from Ammalgem, and he's back. You've probably watched the last one. Now we're watching the new one. Last week we talked about Ammalgem, its vault structure, how it brings lending and market making together. This week we're going to go into a little more depth. If you haven't watched last week's, I highly recommend it. But welcome to the show, Will.
Yeah, thanks for having me back.
Yeah. So I guess first question, we'll just dive on in, is I know that Amalgam has no external price oracle, which is very interesting. So what did you see in Oracle designs that made you decide to remove them entirely? A lot of DeFi structures rely on things like Chainlink, and I'm real curious to see what made you decide to go a different route.
Well, I think the main thing that I saw, and this was a number of years ago when I started building Amalgam, and yet is still true, is that one of the things that was missing from the market is how do you short anything, right? You can't short anything. And this was actually, I always think it's funny because if you look at Compound Protocol's V1 white paper, it's in the second paragraph that they talk about providing lending on chain is has a useful feature of combating this problem where assets have unfathomable value because there's no way for you to or any market participant to short it,
Mm.
right? And this leads to these bubbles, unsustainable growth that eventually collapses. And if you were able to give the market a tool to short things, then you might actually have better, more rational price in the market for these smaller tokens. So that partially is the what was the main motivator, and you can't necessarily get there with the current Oracle structure, right? Because oracles require exchange data, or I think more and more looking at on-chain data, but and I think they're evolving. So this isn't necessarily a blanket statement, but we really wanted to make something that never needed any dependencies so that you could short anything. So if I created a token and you created a token, we could put them in Amalgam and we could see what their value was and allow people to short my token or your token, right? And that was the main motivator of wanting to build without oracles.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think you're right. People sometimes hate on short sellers, but they do bring a little more holisticness to a market. And if there's no way to do it other than just sell because you think the thing's overvalued, it really does create more bubble structure. And I can see how this could long term even out crypto, especially some of these, even a small market cap token getting a little more even rather than what you see with the small ones where just 100x and then 90% dip in a
Yeah.
short amount of time.
And also there's another aspect to this too of creating a motivation for people to actually hold tokens, right? Like we're in this very pessimistic bear market, right? Where everything's going down and people are, does any of this shit have value, right? And there's a lot of that going on. I think we've seen some of these lending structures that were more capable of creating borrowing on more tokens. I think specifically Rari. Rari allowed you to create compound forks as a service. And I always thought it was really interesting that when, say, a project wanted to create their own fork with their own tokens, maybe they have a stable token, they want people to borrow it, so they create this Rari pool for it. Well, they would never let people short their own token. And I always thought, I understand why, right? You don't want people to short your token. You don't want any sell pressure. And
Right.
that's fine. That's one way to think about it. But I actually think in this case, the poison is the medicine. And the reason for that is that if you allow people to short your token, what they do is they create revenue for the people that want to hold it, right? And now you've let the market actually decide A, what your token is worth, and B, what the risk of holding it is worth. right? And those things should converge eventually, right? Maybe not instantaneously, but ideally the short seller's cost of shorting should compensate the long, right? And if the market is completely perfect, which it's not always, those things would be even.
Well, it lead to me what matters more is it leads to truth. What is it short selling reveals the truth of what the value of something is.
Right.
That I think that's what matters most, and truth will set you free. So,
Yeah, exactly. That's a much more simple way of stating it.
yeah. Well, so this gets into we're talking about problems of not being able to short. And I guess my question is when you're building Amalgam, you come into different problems, and you said that they became features for you. And can you give some examples of something you saw that was a problem? You're like, wait a minute, this isn't a bug, it's a feature, and we just need to help people see it that way.
Yeah, I think most that when I think of that concept, it's mostly what comes to mind is our swap fee mechanism. And the main reason for that is I was trying to solve something else when I thought about our swap fee mechanism. And basically just very quickly what it does is the more you move the price in a block, the higher your fee is.
Hmm.
So it's actually has been quite complex. It makes a lot of things, solving some of the expected compute in and out amounts a little bit more complicated. But for that, because we are able to charge somebody changing the price by 2, 4x more, we're actually able to abstract more from centralized exchange, decentralized exchange arbitrage, where the
Mm.
market changes very quickly on the centralized exchanges, and then there's this gas auction for everyone running to the blockchain and trying to sell the asset on the centralized exchange and buy it for cheaper on the decentralized exchange. And when that happens, all the dexes don't charge enough, right? Because there's this free money and none of the dexes can charge enough. And our this fee structure that I created, where I think about it as quadratically scaling fees, is it extracts much more value when those arbitrages happen. So is it perfect? Is it optimal? No, but it's much better for an automated system than the status quo. Now, that feature ended up solving a bunch of other problems, and that was on the lending side. You always have this issue of how do you not make an advantage, or how do you protect about the lending assets from being able to be mispriced through manipulation of the price. And by scaling these fees, the more you move the price, you actually create a much more significant cost for those manipulations, right? And if you can create that cost for manipulation, then a lot of math of when this breaks even and whether it's worth it or not to try to manipulate the DEX becomes much easier and more practical.
I could see that. I can also see how, especially for the people providing liquidity providers, it's better for them too because hey, someone's coming in to manipulate the market or arbitrage, and well, that's fine. They can pay for it.
Right,
Yeah, and so I could see the liquidity providers really liking that. And honestly, I like the idea that if you're trying to do something that you have to pay for it. I mean,
right.
I think that's probably I think that's how it should be with all of them. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I think I had a question, which is how do the swap fees help smooth risk in your system? But I think you answered that, but maybe I'll have you go in a little more detail of that anyway, just in case there's something we missed with that maybe people might not understand.
Yeah, I mean the few things it just makes it there's a few effects even in the centralized decentralized arbitrage, because the fee is so high. What you'll actually see is that that fee has to get factored into the arbitrage. So if all other dexes with a linear fee of whatever it is, 30 bips, 1%, maybe it's 1 bip, they all will move much closer to the price in that SexDex arb. Our DEX will not. It will not move quite as fast because the fee becomes significant enough that you can't arb all the way because now the fee is eating away at some of that ability. And so that means that at the end of the block, our DEX won't quite reach the external market. And what this does is that observation in TWAP then is slightly, I guess, muted compared to the rest of the market. And what that does is it just smooths the output of the TWAP, right? Your average,
Hmm.
right? So this usually when there's these extreme changes, usually overshoot the mark, right? The pendulum is swinging. It should land somewhere in the middle, but when the price moves really suddenly, and so by smoothing those values, you're oftentimes saving some of the liquidations from occurring that don't need to, right? That maybe they are close to valid or valid on the external market pricing for a moment, but it's not sustainable. And by smoothing that, you avoid liquidating some as soon as possible.
No, that does, I can see how that helps a lot of people too. It helps people who are lending, market making, even long-term holders, because you're just, well, not as much long-term holders, but maybe some short-term holders because it's less, instead of this, it's more it's going to be more rounded.
Exactly. Exactly. And you're not overreacting to the market pendulum swings, right? You're trying to really respond to the true price rather than a temporary extreme.
Yeah. I like that. Yeah, you're getting rid of some of the crazy candle wicks and drawdowns and
Exactly.
yeah. Or if you do have them, then the market makers just make some extra money anyway. So so either way Amalgam wins. So
Right.
that's cool. I guess this in a I know Amalgam hasn't launched yet, correct? So some of this question is theoretical, but how should Amalgam behave under stress? Like if a lot of liquidity was to get pulled out, I don't know, just anything, or even just unexpected price action.
Yeah, I mean that's a great question. I think there's two things that, especially if you're a market maker, it's probably really good to be aware of in how our system operates. One thing that's really important to think about with what we are building and having this permissionless lending is cascading liquidations, right? And this is sometimes you call it squeezing the short sellers, right? This I think there's some commentary I was reading somewhere in one of my market updates that people were short. Can't even remember the stock, but recently thought there was a lot of shorts on a certain stock, and then the stock price popped, and when it popped, it makes people who have these short positions have to potentially close their short position. That ends up leading the price to go higher, right? It's with liquidations the same thing. Every time you liquidate, you're putting more sell pressure, and it's this unstable system, right? Like in a dynamic system, like once you put enough pressure on something, it starts to have an accelerated velocity of more and more pressure.
Is it like what happened with GameStop a few years ago with
Yeah,
Robin?
exactly. Exactly. Is you had a bunch of retail putting pressure on GameStop and AMC because they knew that hedge funds had large short positions. And eventually it forces those closing of those short positions, which puts buy pressure on the stock. And then yeah, so it's gamma squeeze is a technical term for it, right? But these things happen when tokens go down, when they go up, right? Oftentimes, very sophisticated traders are always hunting for, hey, I think this fund has a short here that would be liquidated here. So they try to force that situation. So in that, we had to be really mindful of, well, what happens if that happens, and how much market making liquidity do we need available in this token that may not have an external market where it's trading to liquidate the positions that may be cascading.
Hmm.
And there's not a perfect answer for this. I think this sometimes people are like, well, how do you handle this perfectly? And you're, well, you can't actually, right? Neither can Aave. It's actually there's these situations in lending that there's not a perfect solution, especially when it comes to price moving fast. You can mitigate the damage. And so our design is I could probably talk about it for more than is necessary for this call, but basically look at where all the liquidations are going to happen for every loan and decide whether we can support it. And then we structure liquidations such that even if a loan should get liquidated over here, but there's not a room for it because there's already too many positions, it might have to get liquidated sooner at this price closer to the actual price. And so that system is actually probably half of our code. Maybe half the time we were engineering was figuring out how to do this. It ended up being quite complex. And the end result is what I think is really important for anyone who wants to market make is also in distress if the price is moving quickly and we need so much liquidity to liquidate things, you can't burn your liquidity, right? At some point, the system locks down and basically says, "Hey, sorry, we need this liquidity to liquidate these loans." It also has a mechanism to incentivize people to take that risk. So fees actually go up for the market maker when they're locked up. That comes from the positions that are posing the most risk. So there's a dynamic that we're trying to create where the mechanism responds to that pressure and then
Hmm.
tries to get the borrowers to de-risk their positions or change the risk profile out of a hotspot, or that the yield to market makers is high enough that they're, in spite of the risk, wanting to deepen the liquidity in the market. And if all of that also all fails, then eventually the individual positions in the hotspot get distributed out of it. So there's a reset in the as their risk grows very quickly due to the circumstances. And as that happens, it will move the risk out of a hotspot closer to the price. If the price is very near that hotspot, that will result in actual hard liquidations.
Hmm. Well, that's pretty interesting. I'm sure it took you guys a long time to work out, and yeah, that that sounds really difficult to think. Just figure out how should this work? How should this go?
Yeah, it gets really complex when there's multiple dynamics and it's not, yeah, so it was a very hard problem and I'm actually super excited about the solution we came up with because it was so rigorously brutal trying to navigate all of the gotchas.
Yeah, yeah. So I guess, and this ties in, which is what's amalgam? When I say amalgam, I understand. What do you and your team understand about the future of DeFi that you just think other people don't get that amalgam reveals?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times I think about this I mean, everything's a design trade-off, right? And the market, I think, is always the best determination of whether your thesis is correct. So it's easy for me to pre-product and pre-product market fit pontificate about these things. But I think about the roadmap or the journey that Uniswap went on, specifically from Uniswap V2 to V3. And I think about what we're building as rewinding that roadmap back to V2 and making a different design decision to solve the same problem that they were trying to solve with V3. V3 is definitely a very powerful tool. That's why I caveat with everything's a trade-off and the market ultimately decides. But I think the egalitarian nature of DeFi and DeFi Summer was that all of a sudden you had an ability to offer people the benefits of market making, both the benefits and the risks, right? Not necessarily just pure benefit, but like
Hmm.
the benefits of the risk of market making without needing to be sophisticated, right? You could just set it and forget it.
Hmm.
You don't have to worry about going out of range or loss versus rebalancing. And as soon as Uniswap v3 came out and really changed the way that the market thought about it, and I think they marketed their product very well, but I think the problem that they created by the new paradigm of concentrated liquidity was that now everyone was trying to figure out how to concentrate their liquidity and get the max fees while also not getting wrecked. And I think that the problem with that way of thinking is that the more fees you're getting out of market making, the more risk you're taking. And this is something that I think is so misunderstood that only a select niche of the market, I think, was successful with V3 and utilizing it in a way that was sustainable. And a lot of retail was, oh, I can get 10x the fees that I was getting in Uniswap V2. And wait a second, why is my position so messed up? I only have the asset that's going down in value. I don't have any of the asset going up in the value. This doesn't make sense. And
I don't
so
think V3 was, I mean, I don't think V3 was good for retail at all. I think it was good for if you wanted, if you're just swapping, but for market making as retail, I don't recommend it for people unless for small hands. No.
exactly. And so the way that I think about us doing things differently than, say, everybody else is that rather than trying to change the mechanism through the concentrated liquidity, we wanted to solve the capital efficiency problem by giving people swap fees and lending fees and create a lending market around the market making exposure to both create people's ability to go long and short volatility because market making is basically short volatility.
Hmm.
If you borrow the market making position and burn it, then you're long market making volatility. You're shorting the short, which is a long. And so those dynamics actually lead to a system where the market makers have more ways to profit. So they're earning swap fees, they're earning lending fees, and they're also earning fees from the people that want to go long volatility, right? And so this makes it a much more, it makes a system that really can respond to the market dynamics better, and I think pay a higher than market rate for the risk that's being taken. So if Uniswap V2 gave you this much risk and this much risk and this much reward, Amalgam, just full range liquidity, will give you the same risk, but an elevated reward.
I like that. Who doesn't like same risk or less risk, more reward? I mean, that's what everyone's looking for in crypto. We're all degens, right?
Absolutely.
So I guess last question of the day. You're about to launch Amalgam. I'm not gonna ask for a date because I know how that is. So we're about to launch. And actually I won't put this out until you do launch. How about that? So what do you want newcomers to understand who are about to use your product?
Yeah, I mean, think about it. One of the issues that we always came across when trying to raise money and people asking good questions was is amalgam maybe too complex for everybody, right? Did we also create this very powerful tool that only a niche of the market understands and can use and benefit from? And so what I would the reason that I mentioned that is that a lot of our thought and effort went into designing a protocol that could be both things, right? That it could both be retail friendly and easy to use for somebody that maybe just doesn't even get what market making is, right? Or doesn't get the difference between concentrated liquidity and Uniswap V2. Like they don't get these things, but we have a product where they can just put dollars in or just put Ethereum in through a vault. And then we allocate those assets in what we think is both a lucrative opportunity and a way that provides liquidity to our protocol in a way that's sustainable. So those two things are helping us solve the cold start problem. And then also a lot of the really sophistication of our product is almost hidden, right? We want to make the user interface feel other lending protocols where you just go and you just put in your assets and you forget about it. And so we really tried to make the UX as simple as possible. And yeah, I'm just really excited because I think that the market will it have something very different that isn't present right now. And I'm really excited to see how people respond to it. And always open to feedback. We always want to make things as best as they can. So if you don't like it, let us know why.
That sounds great. I like to hear a founder say that. And I'm excited to try it out myself and sounds really cool and good, just good job making sure being careful before it launches, making sure that you're checking for all the bugs, working with all those outside firms. And yeah, I think you guys are going to get a lot of interest.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well,
I hope.
Will, thank you so much for coming on. If you ever want to come back, let me know. And maybe even come back 6 months from now. We can talk about where the state of amalgam if you want.
Yeah,
So,
that would be great.
all right. Well, got everyone, thank you for tuning in. Have a great day.